Aloha, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm so moved and honored, especially to be talking to people back home. I'm in California at my mom's house, and I've been traveling for work for the past week and a half, and planning for this and thinking about the stories that I'm going to share with you and ask that you think about in your own personal lives and us to think about as a community with respect to trauma and resilience. It's so different traveling right now than it has been ever. When I tell people I'm from Maui, people would always say, wow, you're so lucky. Oh, I wish, or can I come home with you? And you all know how that is. And now I see the expressions on people's face. It reminds me of my own, when I lost my my own loss, this feeling of sorrow, compassion. They always ask me, how are you? Were you affected? And I'm said, well, no, I didn't lose my house and I didn't lose any family members, but yeah, I'm really affected. We're all affected, and it's really going to be hard. And I've just been reflecting on that in the last few days before I've come to speak to you all about how trauma, particularly sudden, I mean, this sounds kind of nuts to some people, but sudden trauma in particular changes us permanently in ways that are very hard, for our bodies. Tia mentioned this morning, The Body Keeps the Score, and that book is so profound in the way it explains how trauma affects us at a cellular level. But it also creates compassion, the suffering of trauma, the suffering of knowing that something can happen so unexpectedly in the middle of an ordinary day. The day of the fires, it was windy that morning, but no one thought when they woke up that morning that by the end of the day we were going to lose Lahaina as it was. So I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of that parallel by talking about my experiences working through sudden trauma and becoming more resilient. I think it's a process. And then since the fires, people have called me a lot and asked me to talk to people and help, because I just became kind of the grief person unwittingly. But that's all I want to do is help through sharing my story, and help kind of draw parallels. I think that might help us as we recover in some ways. Trying. So I was going to have everyone kind of introduce themselves individually, but we have a lot of people. So what I'm going to ask is that, I'll ask some questions, and if you can just unmute and chime in, we'll do an open discussion, and you can introduce yourself when you want to speak, if that's okay. I'll introduce myself. My name is Marnie Masuda-Cleveland. I am an education consultant and a long-time teacher from kindergarten through graduate school for 28 years. I taught at the college. I was an English professor at the college most recently, and then left in 2015 to be a full-time consultant, focusing on social emotional learning, project-based learning, and making schools more student-centered, compassionate, and interactive, engaging, and also place-centered. So that's my professional goal, and I think it really dovetails with my personal sort of goal to help as many people as I can through what I've gone through personally. So, there's my teaching, caring about students so much and making sure that that schools are not a place where trauma is induced at the very least. And that schools are a place that is a soft place to land for our keiki who are experiencing trauma when they experience trauma, and not a place that exacerbates or triggers that, the very least. And I have two children, Jackson and Skylar, who went through public school and are now on Maui, and who are now at UH Manoa. My son's at UH Manoa in his senior year as a biochem major. My daughter's in California, majoring in classics at Pitzer College. So, and they're doing, I'll tell you before I start my story, that they're both doing incredibly well. And to tell you the truth, I didn't see that coming when my husband died in 2014, suddenly in the middle of a normal day, and they lost their father. My son was 12 at the time, and my daughter was 11. They're 18 months apart. We were at the dentist. I was off work. We were at the dentist. We got home, and Harlan, my husband of 14 years, had gone body surfing, and he never came home. And I called and called, didn't know what happened. And then much later, about 8:30 at night, I was told that he had died. Just like that. There was no come to the hospital, there's been an injury. There was no warning or easing in at all. Police officer came to my house and told me that he had died in an accident. And then I had to tell my children. And so I kind of want to stop there. A lot of you are social workers, therapists, you work, with people who have had grief and, trauma. That point where you're in the middle of an ordinary day and something unthinkable happens. I've learned now, like, that traumatic impact on our brains and bodies is equivalent to a traumatic brain injury. And I think my own speculation is that when people go off to war and they're going to be in the arena of war, they're in an arena of war. And this isn't to diminish post-traumatic stress disorder in, combat veterans, and that's so traumatic to go through war, and it's constant. But the epistemological shift that happens in, victims or people who experience sudden trauma is like an explosion. Everything you ever thought could happen suddenly can happen, and everything you thought couldn't happen could happen too. So really accommodating that is something I want to home in on, especially as a community now, and kind of try as much to think about what I went through as a parallel of what we might go through as a community. So my first thought was I had to tell my children. I had no idea what that was going to be like, but I had two friends who showed up immediately when I called them. And they accompanied me into the house when I had to tell my kids that their dad was dead. And being flanked by two loved ones when I did that horrible, thing I had to do was so brave of them. But it set us up. I think it set us up for the trajectory that we ultimately, I think, have been on, which is knowing to surround ourselves with people who will support and who those people are. And so when I told my children, I had no idea how they were going to react. And it was the worst part of my life. You know, I mean, you've worked with trauma victims, so there was this just visceral sound that came out of them. That was the most, you know, traumatic part. And to see my children and go and hear it, I thought, I gotta keep it together. Like, I can't make that sound. I have to be strong. I have to be the support. And so there's that, I think, what the community's in right now. And it was sort of like triage. I was numb and I was in shock. But having my kids to take care of, number one, I have to make sure they're okay. I have to make sure they're okay. I have to make sure they're okay. I think about us as a community immediately activating. We have to make sure they're okay. We have to make sure they're okay, and physically activating. And I believe that is so, it's so instinctive, but so important. So, and then being in that mode where we're doing, and helping, while we're in shock and grief too. And sort of putting off, I guess, I think what Tia said this morning, like knowing there's so many people who have it worse than I do right now. I have to help take care of them. But, you know, that builds up, it builds up. And then like the long-term reality of support, mental health support, financial support, community building and support, like the overwhelming kind of immensity of how long that's going to need to be in place. And I think that's where we kind of are now here at Ho'oikaika at this conference, bringing together what I think of as a pantheon of kind of superheroes in a way, like, or building a pantheon of people who are going to be called upon to step in and help. And we can rotate because we're going to need to give ourselves that compassion. So I think that's where we, you know, we're going to need to step out and take a break. But knowing that we have this scaffolding of, you know, community members who are coming together and really making this sort of sacred covenant that we're going to be together and we are going to support this community for the long haul, is, I think, the key to resilience. The key to resilience in my own personal life was I literally created a pantheon. I wrote down, I mean, I'm sure you know what a pantheon is, but you know, if you see a like the Pantheon in Rome, it's all of the gods, all of the demigods and the gods. And each of them have a function. Each of them have this strength. And so I made one with all of the people and what they did, what their superpower was, and how much I loved them and how much I wanted. So I would call upon them. Even when I didn't pick up the phone, I would call upon my cousin Tara in my head. And like, I need her right now, almost to embody me. I need Morgan, who's very straightforward and gets things done and calms me down. So when they weren't there, I called upon what I loved most about them. And it really helped me through. And I don't know how, I just thought I need like a room full of superheroes. And I'm thinking about, and so it helped, and it helped for my kids. They had wonderful friends who had incredible families that their kids came over right after my Harlan died, spent the night, stayed with them. And to this day, that activation and trust, not to back off and go, what a horrible situation, but to envelop us in those families, those parents and friends and what I consider family, sending their kids over, and my kids were outside playing. They were outside running around with friends. And my daughter wrote on the driveway in chalk, "We're going to be okay." And it was incredible to see. And I was lucky. We were really, really fortunate that I had this pantheon of friends and family, and that we had this extended community that just activated to support us through it. And we knew love would be around us. I think that's unfortunately kind of rare, to have that scaffolding in place. And I think, like Tia said, laughing, crying, being together, not feeling ashamed that tragedy had struck our family. All of that happened because people came together and helped us feel normal. So we grew, Jackson, Skylar, and I started running. That physicality of just running every day, because I thought, if I can do one thing a day and I make that my pattern and routine, and I started running, a little bit obsessively, but that physicality was really important for all. Just keep going, and keep moving. And so we made it. We made it all right. And one of the things one of the tips I give, and I think I want you to apply it in your head to our community, is having the flexibility and creativity to start new patterns and not hang on to things that you did before. I'll give you an example. We always had dinner at the table every night, and that's what you should do as a family. We had family dinner at the table every night. And then after Harlan died, our house was full of people for about a month, bringing food and everything. And then it stopped. About a month in, there was the first night where we were going to be just the three of us. And it was really hard. And I'm looking out the window, it's 3:30. It's when Harlan would normally come home. And it just felt like, how are we going to do this? So I made dinner, we sat down at the table, and it was unbearable. It was the three of us with an empty chair where Harlan used to be. And we're eating, and I'm trying to keep the conversation about school and as if it was normal. And then I just looked at them and I said, "Do you want to eat in front of the TV?" Which is something we didn't do. And they were like, "Yes." So we started a new tradition, the three of us. We would have dinner and we would watch The Office, and from start to finish. And that was our new tradition. And I had to let go of like, oh, it's not good to eat in front of the TV. This is not what we do. But we laughed. We had something else to focus on, and we were building a new tradition, the three of us. And if we can extend that, I'm not an expert in community resilience, but I'm thinking about what's ahead for us as a community. And the idea of of really being creative about what we can do differently and what will help us heal and what we need, instead of, trying to make things exactly how they were, because you all know that when we experience trauma, sudden trauma, we're forever changed. So Maui is forever changed. When people react to when we say we're from Maui, and I don't know how long this will last, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry about what happened. We will be associated with a tragedy. I'm associated with two tragedies. We moved forward and I found love again. And 4 years later, Sean died as well suddenly, and unbelievable, unbelievable. And never thought in a million years. In fact, Sean and I would sometimes joke about, like, well, we know you're okay, right? So how do you accommodate that? How do you accommodate it happening twice? Well, the one thing that I've learned, and I knew intellectually, is that when one thing happens, it doesn't make it less likely to happen again. So the odds don't change based on something happening. So I kept that in the back of my mind, and it really freaked me out. I was always worried about my grandfather passing away. I was super close to my grandfather, and I was like, that's not any less likely because this happened. So really thinking ahead, and we do have a tendency to have this magical thinking. I think that, like, we had this big thing happen. Surely it's not going to happen again. We've had our thing, and just really be realistic about the fact that we need to have plans in place and a scaffolding for our community, our keiki, our economy, in the event that it happens again, so that we are resilient. Sadly, the second time around, I knew what to do. It didn't make it less sad and traumatic. It was almost impossible to accommodate, but I knew, again, we have no choice but to, take this insane coincidence and make it sort of an avenue towards more resilience. And we need to heal. We don't want to wallow. We don't want to act like this is going to derail the rest of our lives. And so activating the same kind of resources a second time, and knowing, like, I think I've exhausted those resources. Like, they already were there for me. We've already gone through this. And then just knowing that people were still there, and other, that was it saved us. It's the community that we had created and continued to create literally saved us. Everyone played a role, and our community, I believe, assembling our pantheon where everyone has a role. We all know what our role is to support the healing of our community, and tirelessly, in that we give each other time and breaks. And I was able to have time and breaks as I was supporting my kids, and to go running, to rest, because I had that community support. So really thinking about now, what did I learn? And the other thing I learned is everyone grieves completely differently, and there's not one way to grieve. So communities, we have an island grieving right now, and individuals are grieving in their own way. And that's kind of unwieldy when you think about it. So having enough mental health support, I'm sure we're talking about this today. That is what Ho'oikaika does, right? Having enough resources networked together so that the variety of different grief styles and symptoms can be met wherever they are and when they arise is going to be a huge job, but there's nothing more important. And I'll give you a personal example. So Jackson and Skylar, very different children, very different personalities, grieving very differently. Skylar is a person who immediately, I just remember when she was in kindergarten, she was getting bullied by another little girl. And she went to sit by this little girl. It was at a field trip. So she goes to sit by this little girl, and I'm, chaperoning the field trip. And the little girl goes, "Ew, I don't want to sit next to you." And I watched my 5-year-old daughter go, "Okay," and literally turn her head and go sit next to somebody else. And they started talking, and she was like, "Whatever, that's your issue." And I was like, wow, that's really impressive. But that's just how she was, I think, born. So Skylar was one that turned to resources, was really sad, did not really she didn't want to go to therapy. She didn't want to really talk about it. And my son, everyone said, he needs to talk about it. He needs to talk about it. He needs to talk about it. And Jackson's not someone who processes verbally very much. And so I just thought, I'm not going to force it for either of them when they're ready. And he played a lot of video games. So he was playing video games. And Mom, can you not do that? Thank you. Okay. Sorry. So he'd play video games. That's what he wanted to do. And I just trusted that his process was what he was drawn to. Later, he went to therapy. My daughter finally, when she got into college, she just went to a therapist and started doing storytelling therapy, where she's writing her own story. She's ready for it. She's ready to process it. She got to a place where she started meeting other students that were all in therapy. So I think honoring individual processes without forcing one model on everyone. And I can't say that, I don't want to jinx it, but they're both just, actualizing themselves in a way that's, really beautiful, kind, forthright, and different. They're not fitting into any particular mold. But I think the other bit of advice is be kind to one another by not criticizing one approach or looking at a different approach as not the right way. We all have strengths, and everyone's going to have different needs, and comparing and looking at what worked for one community and saying that's what we need on Maui. We have a different culture. We have built-in culture that we have an approach to healing to apply. And so allowing ourselves to notice how we're different, notice how we're unique, and know that this is going to take a long time. And the more that we can understand ourselves and give ourselves time to heal, and understand that what we're putting in place right now needs to be solid, and just retrofitting, in the event of another earthquake, and making sure that we have this stable approach, and knowing that anything can happen at any time, and preparing for the worst does not mean you're being negative. And I think on an individual level, before Harlan died, I didn't want to talk about what's going to happen if one of us dies. I don't want to talk about wills and trusts. That's ew, that's dark. So I wasn't ready. I didn't have anything in place. When Harlan died, I learned the hard way that it's not bad. It's a load off when you have systems in place in the event that something unexpected happens. And I think, unfortunately, we may have learned that as a community, we could have probably done better in really facing some hard facts about realities of, what we know about brush fires or what we know about, and addressed it in a way that was proactive. But it's not too late. It's not too late to be proactive, I guess, to say, and learn from that. Maui, I think on some level, I enjoyed my reputation, my family's reputation of being a really solid family. We traveled together. Kids were, we were a solid nuclear family, doing well. My husband worked for Maui Electric, and I worked for the college, and we were stable. We were a good family, and I liked that. And then when sudden trauma happened, sudden tragedy, we were no longer that. We were a single mom with 2 kids struggling to figure it out. And, my executive functioning was not good after I lost Harlan and after I lost Sean. I think I'm kind of back now, but going back to work and function, being expected to function like I always had and expecting myself to function. Now I know, I had a traumatic brain injury. I couldn't remember where papers were. I couldn't do my 10-year promotion document and get so I think just thinking about those expectations and that you're really not the same. You've got to heal over time. So the expectation of kind of normalcy returning, I think, quickly. I mean, I think Maui, in parallel, we loved that. We love that. We are the most beautiful place. We are full of aloha. We are like the place that we're the good place. Everyone, we just wanted that to be our reputation and our legacy forever. Why wouldn't it be? We have the most incredible people here. We have the most gorgeous ocean. We have the most mighty mountain, Haleakala. In a little while, I'll read a poem that I wrote about my son in Haleakala towards the end. I think that kind of encapsulates a lot of this, but this sudden trauma happened, and we have to have a new definition of ourselves. And I think there could be nothing better than our new definition, or our new sort of public facing definition is the most incredible, resilient, strong community, the model for other communities to show what can happen when there's a sudden tragedy if you activate this pantheon of community members. And we have so many people activated. How can we leverage this so we create a new paradigm together, rather than trying to just return to what we were before? And that's what I learned through both of my husband's deaths, is that there were times when and there still are times when I'm like, I say it out loud, I just wanted to be married forever to the same person. I just wanted us to be a family forever. Whenever wonderful things happen in my kids' lives or they're struggling with something, I'm like, God, Harlan was here. They need their dad. So it's really sad, but we're different. We are a family. I'm a mom that mothers them in a way that I know best. And I think we've created a really wonderful family of three, that if I was just looking to replace our old normal, or just not wanting things to change and there just being an absence at the table, I don't know how it would have turned out. But accepting that things were going to be different, they weren't going to be perfect. I was making it up as I went along, and it was okay to eat dinner in front of the TV and get sushi from Safeway instead of me cooking dinner every single night. And as we grew and grew through that, through our grief, not seeing like it's not like it was before, how sad, how horrible, it'll never be the same, it'll never be the same. Really trying to shift that to look at the beautiful thing we're creating out of this. And I truly believe that that's what we have been able to do, Jackson and Skylar and me and our extended ohana, so far. You know, we don't know. My father passed away suddenly, a heart attack in December, this last December. And I felt like I have had enough of this. I don't have the resources. I can't do it, but I'm doing it. Taking care of my mom. You know, I'm an only child and an only parent now. But the other thing is the idea of scarcity of internal resources. Like, I've used it up. Like, I really think like I've used this up. I don't have it. But then really challenging that myth that it can get all the way used up. That this long process for me, some days I'm going to have a lot of resources to call upon, and some days I'm going to just need to just sleep, and, you know, I'm not going to have it. And I think our community in the next few years, we're going to, each of us individually is just going to have those times when we're used up. And I don't know collectively, I just think if we have this new paradigm in place, this whole ikaika, right? Strength, making strong. We can't lose if we just keep understanding that that's not going to get used up. Yeah, so I just wanted to open the floor and check in and see if anyone has any questions, or if anyone could reflect a little bit on something that's happened unexpectedly, and unexpected trauma, and something you did to be able to handle the trauma yourself.
I guess I'll start. Hi,
Thanks,
my name is Annie Reinecke, and I'm with CWS. A lot of what you said really resonated with me. My husband unexpectedly passed away last year.
Sorry.
And, yeah, loss and grief is a beast to tame. And it really helps to have, you know, your own pantheon, as you say, to help you stand up, you know, and keep standing. And the importance of being kind to yourself and being patient with yourself, and just being able to be vulnerable and be received and accepted, you know, because as caregivers we have to be strong. So that has helped tremendously, having the support and having the grace to have the support, and it's a journey. And you know, when the fires happened, I live in Kula, you know, 2 miles from where people were being evacuated. So, this kind of work often get triggered. And being able to recognize it and take time out for yourself is just huge. Or being able to say, no, this is my limit, and not feel guilty about it is huge. Because I think the healing process can be a long one, can be a marathon. So, just being able to be flexible as change comes, or as much as possible, I think does help in the healing process. So I thank you for sharing your story, and a lot of it resonated for me.
Thanks for sharing, Annie. Someone else? Have a story to share?
Hey, my name is Paige DuPont, and I'm from the Spirit Horse Ranch on Maui. And I want to thank you for sharing your story and your resilience. I think that as caregivers, the self-care, as Tina talked about, and in your story, I loved the creating new patterns because we get stuck, we're stuck in the trauma, in the brainstem. Our program works with rebuilding new neurons with horses. But as caregivers, I want to share with you guys heart math. I don't know if anyone knows about heart math. It is an incredible tool to just, when we get activated, to go back to our heart space and clear and recognize our emotions and then shift them so that we don't get so drained. We've been training a few different agencies here with trauma response, and I'm very happy to share a link with you guys because we all get activated. I had an experience the other day where a young man approached me outside of FedEx where I was printing materials, and I was unprepared. Before sessions, we're always prepared. We know what's coming, and we put on our counselor, hat. And he just asked, I heard you talking about your equine therapy, and can you tell me more about it? Excuse me. And as I started talking, he just crumbled. And it just hit me hard because we are all grieving. And I really had to go to that heart space, but it did affect me because I was not prepared. I was caught off guard. And so I stayed with him and just held him. He'd lost his home and his place of business. And so when I knew he was safe and, talked with him about our program and gave him some tools, but driving home, I just cried. I cried all the way home, just that moment of release and just grief. And then I got home and my daughter, who also is a partner in the program, said, "Are you okay?" And I go, "No, I'm not okay. I'm not okay." And talked it out with her, the support system you talked about, and just let it out. I'm fortunate I could go in and hug my horse and just cry some more, and then replenish through my using our breathing technique. And just have grace. We're not superhero with stone hearts. We have to do our own grieving, and whatever that new pattern is, we too have to create new patterns. We too have to find resilience because our hearts are broken. And our family will take Sundays and we'll go jump in the ocean. And we do just this process of cleansing and releasing a lot of what we've taken on that week, working with others. And I find that it's really helpful. And so if anybody does want any information, in fact, maybe I'll put it in the chat. I'll put the trauma response. It's an hour-long course. It's free. And it's very helpful for first responders, counselors, therapists, when you're working with people in trauma. So thank you so much for sharing again. Really moved and grateful for your story.
Thank you so much for sharing as well. Anyone else have a question or a story to share? Deb?
Aloha.
Aloha.
So sorry I had to join late because I was doing troubleshooting with other participants, but I caught the last little bit of your story, Marnie, and I'm very moved. I lost 3 really close friends unexpectedly this year. It's really been hard. And I think I'll just share one of the things that has helped me is a practice, a moving meditation practice called conscious dance. And it's kind of no steps to learn. There's no way to do it wrong. It's moving your body with others in community, dance like no one's watching, but in a way that helps connect body, mind, emotion, spirit. And that has really just been, for me, godsend. It's just what has really been a lifesaver. And there's, I think the community that comes with it is what helps make it so effective. There are several people who teach on Maui and it's a practice that's done throughout the world. And so I just thought I would share that real quickly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? I really appreciate that. Anyone else have a strategy or a story to share?
I have my hand raised. Sorry, I'm not going to turn
Oh,
on
hi,
my
I didn't
camera.
see that. I'm super sorry.
Hi.
I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
no worries. No worries. Thank you
Okay.
so much for sharing. And I apologize. I'm not going to turn on my camera because I did a little bit of crying hearing
Oh.
your story and whatnot. So my apologies. But thank you so much for sharing and everybody else who shared. And even just in the beginning with Tia's opening, it just really resonated for me. So I myself too had several losses throughout the last couple of years. My mom, my grandmother, and just this last weekend, a close uncle. So, and I've been in Lahaina the last, sorry, I'm so sorry. The last
Don't
week,
be sorry.
just hearing the different traumas and sadness that people have gone through, I just really, it can really affect you. And I just want to tell you all thank you and my apologies again for crying, but it's good to hear these things and to just remember we're all human, and even though we're going through our own things, we can show up for others and help. And it's just, I was meant to be here today because I was supposed to go to Lahaina this week and I decided not to go so I could attend this conference, and I'm very grateful that I did. And I just wanted to again say thank you and the grateful real. And it's hard to hear family stories and the loss of children and all of those things. It gets it's hard. But then also seeing the other side of it, the happy children that are going back to school who are able to, and being with them at the bus stop in the morning and seeing their faces when they reunite with their friends and that type of stuff, it really keeps you moving and keeps you going. And just finding the grounding and the balance again is sometimes rough when you're going through your own personal stuff as well. But just again, thank you all so much for sharing the tips and the ideas, and I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa, and don't apologize for crying. I think that it's so important to just, when we let it out, we have that catharsis. It cleanses and heals. So I'm glad that you're able to do that and process that. Anyone else want to share? I'm trying to pull up my poem, but it's a PDF and Adobe's blocking me. Stop. Okay. So another strategy, I'm a writer as well. I'm working on a memoir called Mother of Beauty, and tentatively subtitled several deaths in rapid succession, which is a little bit tongue in cheek, but you know, in my memoir, there's a lot of humor along with the grief, and so many stories that come out of it. But I am working through that. But writing through it is not easy. But telling your story from start to finish of your trauma is the first step, I really, really think, in healing. Just being able to tell it straight through. So that, you know, that's what, I'm sorry to be so classical. My daughter's a classical major, but like the Greek tragedies, you know, it's just tell the story so we can all grieve together. And starting there with what happened. And that helps everyone. I studied with the poet Allen Ginsberg many years ago, and he was quite a character. One of the things he said that resonated so much with me is that my candor, the quote is, my candor invites your candor. So by being candid, open, vulnerable, telling your story without shame, you invite and allow another person to do the same. And it's a chain reaction that I think we can apply as we move forward from our own tragedy. But one thing I did was write poetry afterwards, and I'm hoping it's going to let me scroll down. This is really annoying that Adobe is.
Marnie, is there a way that we can help you with that? Maybe Jacob could share it on his screen, or
I think I can do it. I think I have enough that I can read it. So my son was in the Boy Scouts, Troop 808. His father was really involved, Harlan, and he had been preparing to do the Haleakala hike with his troop, which is the big, difficult hike into the crater, and they spend the night in the crater. They tent camp, and Harlan had been getting the stuff ready for him, packing and helping him pack his backpack. Harlan died on a Tuesday, and Saturday was the hike. And we all said, you know, you don't have to go if you don't want to, but he elected he wanted to go hike Haleakala. And I just saw it as such a, you know, a testament to him and a metaphor for resilience. But the most touching and kind of sad part is he was going to borrow his dad's hiking boots. And so he was practicing walking in them before Harlan died. And he still wore them on the hike. And they were a little too big, and they ended up kind of blowing out and getting water in. And they're just so much, it just sort of rolled forward as this really, you know, extended metaphor and symbolic kind of moment. So I wrote a poem and I called it Boots. And I just wanted to read you. Okay, it's called Boots. The night before his father died, the boy walked the living room floor in the hiking boots. They had held his father's feet many times. They had come between his father's solid feet and the island, between his fleeting feet and black lava the earth had thrown up long ago, jagged, porous, smooth, almost moving, new, many times over and over, toward rising and setting suns, under full moons. They had taken his father to places where the island ends and ocean begins, to ponds appearing and disappearing beneath waterfalls, appearing and disappearing over rusty, rutted, muddy paths. They knew his father's tread, the shallow contour of his arches. They had memorized the rhythm of his stride. Days later, they gripped the boy's feet. They carried him down the mountain while all around the island wept. And now when I read that poem, I just think about a lot about our island and our community and, you know, our path ahead. And the footsteps, you know, not the shoes, not the boots, but the footsteps of the ancestors who had inherent resilience and knew what this island needed inherently. And just really hoping that and believing that we can just collectively really allow ourselves to return to what is already inherently here, change course if we need to, and just, you know, like scale the mountain, do what we need to do together, and, you know, calling upon the wisdom of our ancestors and those who have passed recently and those who have passed long ago. And I really, I believe we can all do this. I think that that's all, unless somebody has a couple more questions. I think we're finished. Thank you very, very much for being here and for sharing.